This is the Financially Simple Podcast, a show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. And now, here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome to Financially Simple. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread. Today, we're still in our deep dive and building a best-in-class risk management department. And the reason for it is we're trying to grow the value of our companies. Today, I titled the episode, Insurances to Protect from Lawsuits. See, as we're trying to build a best-in-class risk management department, we must shift our focus from the legal world now. We've been working with lawyers for the last 5, 6, 7 episodes. Now we're going to shift it to the insurance world, where we're going to begin working with insurance agents. I have lots of friends who are insurance agents, and I have lots of friends which are attorneys. And I got to tell you, I like them all as a person, but man, insurance agents wear me out. They always seem like they're kind of salesy in nature. I'm just not a salesy type person. I see people who are often sold things by bad insurance agents. At least in the lawyers, you have to go to school and pass a bar exam. Man, insurance says you go to school for a little bit and then they teach you how to sell. And so insurance agent can be a little frustrating to me. But nonetheless, now that I'm digressing from my soapbox, we still have to have insurance. See, for optimal protection, the small business owner must not only deal with the attorneys on the documentation side of things that are there to help us prevent the lawsuits, but we need to establish a relationship where if we are sued, we have protection. And insurance policies help us in those areas. And there's several different types of insurance policies. Some of these you may have, some of these you may not have. But today I want to deal specifically with those policies which give the business owner the opportunity to help maybe potentially settle a lawsuit or maybe even potentially pay the claim of a lawsuit whenever there's an error there, or maybe even to prevent a lawsuit. We made the quote last episode that 75% of small business owners are concerned about being sued frivolously. So here's some insurances that you can look at. Some of these you should have. Candidly, you should have these things that'll help you protect your business and your property from lawsuits. So the first one is probably the most common, and it's called a general liability insurance policy. And we did an interview a long time ago back with a friend of mine named Matthew Bryan, who is an insurance agent, and he did a great job explaining what general liability insurance is. So we'll make a link to this on the blog post itself, to where Matthew Bryan gives a great example on what general liability insurance is. But basically, this is slip and falls. This is you're paying for damages to those individuals who were injured while on company property. In our office at our previous location at Heritage Investors, one of our clients was in the bathroom and he was doing something. He leaned over and picked his head up real fast and hit his head on something on the wall, and it actually busted open his head. Now, luckily, this guy was a doctor, and so we had another doctor friend that went in and sewed his head back up. But, should he not have been a doctor, had those connections who would sew his head up for him complimentary, then that particular facility would have used their general liability insurance to repair or to cover the damage on his head, to cover the doctor visit on his head. So this is basically slip and fall type of coverage. And it's to protect those who might get injured. You walk into a building and someone didn't have a sign out, or you slip and fall and break your leg or damage your knee because of whatever reason. But let's call it carelessness. There's somebody spilled some water on the floor and the building custodian didn't have wiped up. General liability insurance covers you there. Another insurance which is used that also helps you is product liability insurance. Product liability insurance. And what this insurance does is it will cover most lawsuits in which a customer claims to have been injured by a product in particular. They're required in most states, but let's say you purchase something and that piece of equipment were to malfunction. That's a product liability insurance. I saw a case I read years ago with a prospective client who was injured in a car wreck, and the seatbelt mechanism, which clipped, in the old days you used to have clipping mechanisms, a little bit different than they are today, it had failed. And there was a liability issue because the product had failed and it didn't live to how it should have. And so the individual won a lawsuit, and therefore the product liability insurance of that company who made that seatbelt clip settled that lawsuit. Another coverage that you may want to look at is what's called automobile liability insurance. You may be a solopreneur where you're operating on your family vehicle, but you may not be. So automotive liability insurance, you can't overlook it. And you're going to purchase this whether it's a company car or maybe an employee's car is being used for company purposes. So let's say that I were to send one of my team members out to go pick up some supplies for me. And in that particular transition, and that while they were leaving, there was an incident. And they became liable while on the clock as I instructed them to take their personal automobile out and to go get an item. Well, that's where the liability insurance for the automobile has to be in place for the business owner. So it's there to essentially prevent the already high risk that's resulting from the automobile accident. It's there to help settle a major lawsuit. In every city I've been in, I drive down the interstate and I see these signs where these attorneys are advertising they can get more money than anybody else. They use the term ambulance chasers. And so this is where automobile liability insurance comes into play. It helps to potentially settle a lawsuit for you. Another one you want to cover is workman's comp insurance. And so this is going to cover job site injuries for employees or illnesses or lost wages or medical expenses. So it's covering on behalf of the employees where in the event something happens. And like I said, injuries, illness, wages, medical expenses, et cetera, et cetera. That's what workman's comp insurance does. My father actually was on workman's comp insurance for a little bit because of an injury that occurred at work. I've seen where workman's comp insurance is vital to people who are feeding families. And so in most states it's required, especially when you get over a certain number of employees. So it's a good insurance as a mitigation for it. It's a really good insurance for mitigation tools.
You are listening to Financially Simple, destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner.
Now, one that you may not be popular with is what's called D&O or Directors and Officers Insurance. And this protects the directors or officers of a company against their actions. Most commonly, you'll hear like sexual harassment things or wrongful terminations. And basically, if a director of your officer of your company is, as a direct result of their actions, find themselves in a particular legal situation, then the insurance is there to help cover the cost and find a settlement or find some lost damages in the event of a lawsuit. So D&O. If you're a business owner or you have a partnership or you have an officer in the company, then you may want to consider directors and officers insurance. And it's there to protect you from a particular action. Let's say you terminated somebody wrongfully and it was outside your purview or job description. Let's say there was a sexual harassment issue. D&O could help you in those particular situations. Now that I've said that, I'm not sure it helps in sexual harassment issues. I think that would go underneath a different issue. But those are some business insurances that'll typically help you. But let's say now that you're not operating a business, so to speak, where you have a brick and mortar building. Let's say you're operating a home-based business in today's environment where you have gig or the gig environment or the micro job environment. Many people operate from home and they feel like, well, Justin, I have a homeowner's policy and that's all I need. That's not true. That's not true. So if you have a business and you actually operate from home, then there's some policies that you're going to want to think about. So the most popular one, which is the inclusive policy, is called a BOP, B-O-P, and that stands for Business Owner's Policy. Pretty simple, pretty original, right? So a BOP or business owner policy is probably the most inclusive type of insurance is available for the home-based business owner. It's going to include both property and liability, and it's going to cover things like your general liability, like we talked about earlier, theft, or maybe even some product liability. So it's going to be a little bit more inclusive in nature. And it will also cover the actual structure in which the business is located. So your house. Sometimes it'll cover the actual structure. Now, then they may put a little bit of add-ons, some extra add-ons, like some things we're going to talk about in the next episode, some additional riders or some add-ons to your base policy. So your business overhead or your BOP policy is one of the most popular and most inclusive policies, and they can be customized. And a good insurance agent who's there to protect you and your business will customize a BOP policy to make sure that in the event that something were to happen, that you at least have some coverage there to help mitigate the risk. Another insurance policy you may want to choose is a home office policy. Now, it's a good policy. It's probably the best policy for companies that only have a little bit of traffic on site, just a small amount. Not a lot of traffic. In other words, not people coming and going on a regular basis, but just a little bit. It's a policy is a combination of like homeowners and business, but it's a step down. It's not quite as inclusive or as holistic as your BOP policy. It's kind of middle of the road in nature, but sometimes they can do things. They can cover some extra expenses. However, most of the time, home office policies do not cover natural disasters. Just an interesting thing about home office policies. You may say, well, Justin, I don't need either one of those. I have a business endorsement. I heard this the first time whenever one of our clients talked to a very poor insurance agent who didn't ask the questions that the client was trying to tell them. But nonetheless, a business pursuance is an endorsement that goes on a homeowner's policy, and it's probably the least protective. It doesn't offer near the scope of coverage that a business owner policy or home office policy does. So it's logical for someone who really doesn't have a lot of equipment and not a lot of people visiting their house. It's more of a service style industry. So, let's say that you're doing bookkeeping from home and that's all you're doing. Well, a business endorsement policy may work. But if you have people coming in or out of your house on a regular basis, it's probably not the policy that I would choose. So I would call it the least protective option, the least. So BOP, the business owner's policy, is the best for home office use. The home office policy is probably middle of the road, is the way I would describe it. And the business pursuits endorsement is the least favorite I have out there, but it's out there nonetheless. Another one that you may want to consider, it's not going to necessarily help you all the time, but it's a personal umbrella policy. A personal umbrella policy is simple. It basically puts an umbrella, additional coverage limits over your home and your auto. Generally, it's sold in like $1 million increments. So you may have $1 million policy or a $2 million policy. They're there just to add a little bit more coverage to your home and auto. Now, look, it's not going to be the same as a business overhead, a BOP. It's not going to be the same coverage as a general liability or workman's comp. It just doesn't cover those items. But that gives you a quick overview on the types of policies that can be used to help mitigate or reduce or help cover potential lawsuits. Litigation is a reality. It's here. It's going to be here for us as business owners. But nonetheless, we can buy some insurances that help mitigate our risk. And if you're working with a planner, they're going to tell you some of these things. If you're working with a competent insurance agent, they're going to tell you some of these things. A good attorney is going to tell you some of these things. So I've given you just a basic list. Next episode, we're going to continue on our insurance quest and deal with the other policies that you may have in your business. Until then, look, if you like the podcast, do me a favor, share it with a friend. If you don't like the show, share it anyways. I say it every week. Life is hard. Life is good and life can be frustrating. Money doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all go out and make it a great day.
You have been listening to the Financially Simple podcast. The information in this show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor.